Marcus Chen sat in the back corner of the Galactic Military Academy's largest lecture hall, his worn notebook open to a page filled with meticulous diagrams. While other cadets chatted loudly about their weekend plans or complained about the upcoming tactical exercises, Marcus remained silent, his pen moving steadily across the paper as he sketched modifications to standard plasma rifle configurations. The academy buzzed with activity as beings from dozens of species mingled in the corridors. Tall, elegant Altarians with their crystalline features dominated most conversations, their musical voices carrying easily over the crowd. The bulky Vorthon cadets with their rock-like skin and forearms moved through the halls like living boulders, while the quick-darting Zephyrians flitted between groups with their gossamer wings catching the artificial light. Among all these exotic beings, humans were still relatively new to the galactic community. Only 50 years had passed since first contact, and Earth's children were often viewed as curiosities rather than serious military prospects. Most human cadets tried to compensate by being louder, brasher, more aggressive than their alien classmates. They formed tight groups, spoke in booming voices, and made sure everyone knew they belonged. Marcus was different. He had arrived at the academy 6 months ago with the same enthusiasm as his peers, but something had changed in those first few weeks. Maybe it was the way Professor Kelthran, a distinguished Altarian war hero, had dismissed his question about unconventional warfare tactics with a melodic laugh. Perhaps it was how his Vorthon roommate had transferred out after 3 days, muttering something about sharing space with primitive mammals. Or it could have been the incident in the combat simulator when his squad leader, a golden-scaled draconian named Vextar, had openly stated that humans should stick to supply runs and leave real fighting to evolved species. Whatever the reason, Marcus had gradually withdrawn. He still attended every class, completed every assignment, and participated in every drill. But he stopped raising his hand, stopped offering suggestions, stopped trying to prove himself worthy of respect. Instead, he observed. He listened. He learned. The other human cadets had noticed his change and interpreted it as weakness. Sarah Martinez, a fierce competitor from the Luna colonies, often shot him disgusted looks during training exercises. "You're making us all look bad," she had hissed after a particularly brutal hand-to-hand combat session, where Marcus had been paired with a Vorthon and systematically demolished. Fight back, for crying out loud. But Marcus had been fighting back, just not in the way anyone expected. Every evening, while his classmates socialized in the recreation areas or studied in groups, Marcus retreated to the Academy's extensive digital archives. He devoured historical military texts from every known civilization, studied battle tactics from conflicts spanning thousands of years, and analyzed the weaknesses inherent in every major species' combat doctrines. The Altarians, for all their technological sophistication, relied heavily on energy shields and ranged combat. Their crystalline physiology made them incredibly resistant to energy weapons but surprisingly vulnerable to kinetic impacts. The Vorthons were powerhouses in close combat, their forearms and stone-like skin making them nearly unstoppable in melee situations, but their massive bulk made them slow to adapt to changing battlefield conditions. The Draconian Empire's military might was built on overwhelming firepower and tactical superiority, but their reptilian pride often led them to underestimate opponents they considered inferior. Marcus filled notebook after notebook with observations, theories, and tactical innovations. He studied human military history with renewed interest, paying particular attention to how Earth's armies had consistently defeated larger, better-equipped forces through ingenuity, adaptability, and sheer bloody-minded determination. The Battle of Thermopylae, where 300 Spartans held off a massive Persian army, Hannibal's impossible victory at Cannae, the guerrilla tactics that had frustrated mighty empires from Vietnam to Afghanistan. Humans might lack the natural advantages of their galactic neighbors, but they possessed something unique, an almost insane capacity for creative problem-solving under pressure. While other species had evolved specialized traits that made them dominant in specific environments, humans had survived by being generalists, adapters, innovators. During weapons training, Marcus noticed how the standard-issue plasma rifles were designed for Altarian physiology, making them awkward for human hands. Rather than complain like his classmates, he quietly sketched modifications that would improve ergonomics and rate of fire. In tactics class, when Professor Kelthron presented classic battle scenarios, Marcus saw opportunities that others missed. Unconventional approaches that could turn certain defeat into unlikely victory. His grades remained solid but unremarkable. He never volunteered for leadership positions in group exercises, never argued with instructors, never drew attention to himself. To his classmates and teachers alike, Marcus Chen had become invisible, just another mediocre human cadet struggling to keep up with superior beings. The irony was that Marcus was thriving. Free from the pressure to constantly prove himself, he had found a kind of peace in obscurity. He trained harder than ever, but quietly. He studied more intensively than his peers, but alone. He developed skills and insights that none of his instructors were teaching, but he kept them to himself. As the weeks passed, Marcus noticed patterns in the Academy's training regimen. The scenarios were always variations on classical warfare. The tactics emphasized traditional strengths of the major galactic powers, and the equipment was standardized for optimal performance across multiple species. It was logical, efficient, and completely predictable. Perfect for an enemy who understood how the Galactic Defense Force thought. Marcus had read the classified reports hidden deep in the Academy's archives, the ones that spoke of strange attacks on outer colony worlds, ships destroyed by weapons that left no recognizable signatures, entire settlements vanishing without distress calls. The reports were buried under layers of bureaucracy and dismissed as isolated incidents, but Marcus saw the pattern emerging. Something was coming. Something that understood the galactic military's strengths and weaknesses better than they understood themselves. When it arrived, the Defense Force's rigid doctrines and predictable tactics would be useless. But maybe, just maybe, a quiet human cadet who had spent months studying unconventional warfare and thinking like an underdog might have something to contribute. For now, though, Marcus Chen remained what he had always been, the invisible student in the back corner taking careful notes while the galaxy's future warriors prepared for the wrong war. The emergency alarm shattered the pre-dawn silence of the Galactic Military Academy like broken glass. Marcus jerked awake in his single dormitory room, instantly alert as red warning lights bathed everything in crimson. Through his small window, he could see ships launching from the Academy's defense platforms, their engines streaking white-hot across the star-filled sky. His communicator crackled to life with Admiral Thissa's voice, the veteran Altarian's usual musical tone replaced by sharp urgency. All cadets report to Assembly Hall 7 immediately. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Marcus pulled on his uniform and joined the flood of confused cadets rushing through the corridors. The alien students chattered excitedly in dozens of languages, their voices mixing into a cacophony of speculation and nervous energy. Some seemed thrilled at the prospect of real action, while others appeared genuinely frightened. Assembly Hall 7 was packed beyond capacity. Marcus found a spot against the back wall, standing between a nervous-looking Zephyrian whose wings kept twitching and a group of human cadets who were whispering theories about what could have triggered such a massive response. Admiral Thyssa strode onto the stage, her crystalline features catching the harsh emergency lighting. Behind her, a massive holographic display flickered to life, showing a three-dimensional map of the galaxy's outer rim territories. Red markers indicated dozens of locations, scattered across multiple sectors. Cadets, Thyssa began, her voice carrying easily through the hall's perfect acoustics. At 0347 Standard Time, we received simultaneous distress calls from 23 outer colony worlds. Contact was lost with all 23 locations within minutes of the initial transmissions. A collective gasp rose from the assembled students. Marcus felt his stomach tighten as he recognized several of the marked locations from his private research. These were the same systems that had experienced the mysterious attacks he had been tracking. Initial reconnaissance flights have confirmed our worst fears, Thyssa continued. Each colony has been completely destroyed. Not damaged, not occupied, obliterated. Preliminary scans show no survivors, no intact structures, and no identifiable weapon signatures. The holographic display zoomed in on one of the affected systems, showing the scattered debris that had once been a thriving mining colony of 50,000 beings. Where cities should have stood, only scorched craters remained. The orbital stations had been reduced to expanding clouds of metallic dust. More disturbing still, the Admiral's voice dropped lower. Our patrol fleets report contact with unknown vessels in 17 different sectors. Ships of completely alien design, Using technology we cannot identify or counter, our forces have engaged these vessels 3 times. Each engagement has resulted in the complete destruction of our ships with minimal apparent damage to the enemy. The hall fell silent except for the soft humming of life support systems. Marcus watched as fear replaced excitement on the faces around him. This was not the glorious battle scenario the cadets had trained for. This was something far worse. The enemy fleet is massive, Thysa announced. Long-range sensors indicate at least 10,000 vessels of varying sizes, all heading toward the core systems. At their current speed, they will reach the outer defense perimeter in 72 hours. A draconian cadet near the front raised his scaled hand. Admiral, what are our orders? When do we deploy? Thysa's crystalline features seemed to dim slightly. You misunderstand, Cadet Zorthak. You are not deploying. As of this moment, the Academy is under full evacuation protocols. Transport ships are already en route to return you to your homeworlds. For your own safety, you will take no part in the coming battle. The response was immediate and explosive. Cadets throughout the hall erupted in protests, their voices overlapping in a dozen languages. The draconian cadets roared their displeasure, while the Vorthon students pounded their massive fists against the walls. Even the normally serene Altarians were singing discordant notes of disagreement. Marcus remained silent, but his mind was racing. Everything was happening exactly as he had predicted, but far faster than he had expected. The enemy had clearly studied the Galactic Defense Force's tactics and technology, waiting for the perfect moment to strike when they could inflict maximum damage with minimal resistance. Silence. Thysa's voice cut through the chaos like a crystalline blade. This is not a debate. Initial casualty reports indicate that our finest battle groups, led by the most experienced commanders in the galaxy, have been eliminated with contemptuous ease. You are cadets, partially trained students who would serve only to add to the casualty count. But Admiral, called out Sarah Martinez, Marcus's fellow human, we've trained for combat scenarios. Some of us have family on the worlds being threatened. We can't just run away. You can and you will, Thysa replied firmly. The evacuation transports will arrive within 6 hours. Use that time to pack essential belongings and prepare for departure. Dismissed. As the cadets filed out of the assembly hall, Marcus lingered, watching the holographic display cycle through images of destruction. Each destroyed colony showed the same pattern. Complete annihilation with surgical precision, no defensive measures proving effective, no escape pods or survivors detected. Back in his dormitory room, Marcus did not pack. Instead, he opened his notebooks and spread them across his small desk. Everything he had learned, every observation he had made, every unconventional tactic he had developed suddenly seemed inadequate in the face of such overwhelming force. But something nagged at him. The enemy attacks were too perfect, too clean. No force in galactic history had achieved such complete victory without sustaining at least some losses. Either these attackers possessed technology so advanced that resistance was meaningless, or they had such detailed knowledge of Galactic Defense Force capabilities that they could counter every weapon, every tactic, every defensive measure. Marcus activated his computer terminal and began accessing the Academy's tactical databases. Officially, he lacked clearance for most of the files he needed, but months of quiet observation had taught him the passwords and access codes used by various faculty members. He might be invisible to his instructors, but that did not mean he was blind. The battle reports from the frontier engagements made for grim reading. The enemy ships appeared to know exactly when and where GDF vessels would maneuver, countering tactics before they could be fully implemented. They used weapons specifically designed to exploit the weaknesses of Altarian shields, Vorthon armor, and draconian battle formations. It was as if the enemy had studied the same tactical manuals that Marcus had read. But unlike him, they had gained access to classified defense protocols and real-time strategic communications. The attackers were not just powerful, they were informed. A soft chime from his communicator interrupted his research. A message had arrived from Admiral Thysa's office marked for all cadets. First transport departs in 4 hours. All students must report to Docking Bay 5 with required documentation and personal effects. Marcus stared at the message for a long moment, then closed his terminal and walked to his window. Outside, the Academy's defenses were powering up, massive energy weapons rotating to face the stars. Ships continued launching from the military installations, their pilots no doubt believing they were heading toward a conventional battle. They were flying toward a slaughter, and there was nothing a quiet human cadet could do to stop it. Or was there? Marcus opened his bottom desk drawer and pulled out a small recording device he had purchased months ago for note-taking. Throughout his time at the academy, he had used it to record lectures and training sessions for later review. But he had also captured something else. Hours of casual conversations between faculty members, snippets of classified discussions overheard in hallways, fragments of strategic planning sessions that took place in supposedly secure areas. Everyone ignored the quiet human student, which meant they spoke freely around him, and Marcus had been listening to everything. Marcus made his decision in the space between heartbeats. While other cadets rushed to pack their belongings and secure passage on the evacuation transports, he slipped away from the main corridors and made his way toward the academy's restricted sections. His months of careful observation had taught him the guards' patrol patterns, the blind spots in the security systems, and most importantly, the maintenance tunnels that connected every building on the massive campus. The Strategic Operations Center was located 3 levels below the main academy complex, a heavily fortified bunker designed to coordinate military responses across multiple star systems. Under normal circumstances, even junior officers required special clearance to enter. But these were far from normal circumstances, and the chaos of the evacuation had left several security checkpoints understaffed. Marcus crawled through a ventilation shaft for nearly 20 minutes, following a route he had memorized weeks earlier during a routine maintenance inspection. The shaft opened into a supply closet adjacent to the communications hub, where dozens of officers worked frantically to coordinate the galaxy's defense. Through the closet's slightly open door, Marcus could see the main tactical display showing the enemy fleet's approach. The alien ships moved in perfect formation, their black hulls seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. Intelligence estimates had grown more dire with each passing hour. 12,000 vessels now, with more arriving through what appeared to be some form of advanced faster-than-light travel. "Sir, we're receiving reports from the Kepler Defense Fleet," announced a young Zephyrian communications officer, her wings trembling with stress. "Admiral Vorthak reports successful engagement with enemy scouts. He's requesting permission to pursue and gather intelligence." Admiral Thysa, who had apparently moved her command post to the operations center, studied the tactical display with growing concern. "Permission denied. We cannot afford to lose another battle group to overconfidence. Order all fleets to maintain defensive positions around core systems." Marcus pressed closer to the door, straining to hear every word. Through his hidden recording device, he captured not just the spoken orders but the underlying desperation in the commanders' voices. These were the galaxy's finest military minds, and they were terrified. "Admiral," called out a draconian intelligence officer, his scaled features twisted with confusion, "we're detecting some unusual patterns in the enemy communications. The signals are heavily encrypted, but the base transmission protocols appear to be familiar." "Familiar how?" Thysa demanded. "They're using modified versions of our own quantum communication arrays. The fundamental technology is identical to Galactic Defense Force standard equipment, just enhanced beyond our current capabilities." A chill ran down Marcus's spine as the implications became clear. The enemy was not just technologically advanced. They were using the galaxy's own communication technology against them. But how was that possible unless— "Ma'am," another officer interrupted. "Priority transmission from High Command. Admiral Kethazar wants to speak with you privately." Thysa nodded grimly and moved toward a secure communication booth at the far end of the operations center. Marcus could no longer hear the conversation, but he could see the Admiral's crystalline features growing more transparent with shock as she listened to whatever High Command was telling her. When Thysa emerged from the booth 5 minutes later, her usual composure had completely shattered. She stood silent for a long moment, staring at the tactical display as if seeing it for the first time. When she finally spoke, her musical voice was barely above a whisper. "All personnel, classification level Delta 7 and above, remain for special briefing. Everyone else clear the operations center immediately." Marcus watched as most of the staff filed out, leaving only a dozen senior officers in the vast chamber. He adjusted his position in the supply closet, knowing that whatever was about to be revealed would be crucial to understanding the true nature of this threat. "What I am about to tell you," Thysa began, is classified at the highest levels of galactic security. The enemy we face is not unknown. They are the Umbral Collective, a faction that split from the galactic community approximately 200 years ago. The assembled officers exchanged shocked glances. Marcus had never heard of the Umbral Collective, despite his extensive research into galactic military history. If they had been erased from the historical records, their crimes must have been extraordinary. The collective was formed by representatives from every major species in the galaxy. Thuisa continued. Scientists, military leaders, and political figures who believed that the current democratic structure of galactic civilization was inherently flawed. They advocated for a more direct approach to governance. What kind of direct approach? Asked the draconian intelligence officer. Total subjugation of what they termed lesser species, under the guidance of a genetically and technologically enhanced ruling class. When their proposals were rejected by the Galactic Council, they stole advanced military prototypes and fled to the Galactic Rim territories. Marcus felt pieces of a massive puzzle clicking into place in his mind. An enemy force composed of the galaxy's own species, enhanced with 2 centuries of technological development and bitter resentment. They would know every weakness, every tactical doctrine, every defensive strategy in the Galactic Defense Force playbook. For the past 200 years, Thuisa continued, they have been building their strength in the dark spaces between star systems. They have been watching us, studying us, and preparing for this moment. Every battle we have fought, every tactical innovation we have developed, every defensive improvement we have implemented, they have observed it all. But why attack now? Asked a Vorthan tactical officer. If they have been preparing for 2 centuries, why not strike when they were ready 50 years ago? The answer came from an unexpected source. A quiet human voice from the back of the operations center. Because they were waiting for us. Every head in the room turned toward the speaker, a tall woman in civilian clothes whom Marcus did not recognize. She stepped forward into the light, revealing the insignia of a xenoarchaeologist on her collar. Dr. Elizabeth Hawthorne, Terra Xenological Institute, she introduced herself. I have been studying Umbral artifacts for the past decade. They did not attack 50 years ago because they knew something was coming that would change the balance of power in the galaxy, something that would either make them invincible or obsolete. Humanity, Thuisa said quietly, understanding dawning in her crystalline features. Exactly. Human military innovation represents a completely unpredictable variable in galactic warfare. Our species develops tactics and technologies that no other civilization has ever conceived of. The Umbral Collective has been waiting to see how we would be integrated into galactic defense structures before making their move. Marcus pressed closer to the door, his heart racing. Everything he had theorized about human military potential was apparently true, but on a scale far greater than he had imagined. They have studied every species in the galaxy except one, Dr. Hawthorne continued. Every tactical manual, every weapon system, every defensive strategy, except ours. Because we have only been part of galactic civilization for 50 years, and most of our military innovations have been classified or ignored by the other species. So what are you suggesting? Asked the draconian officer. I am suggesting that the one advantage we have over an enemy that knows everything about galactic military doctrine is an ally that has never been allowed to contribute to galactic military doctrine. The operations center fell silent as the implications sank in. Marcus could see the conflict on every face and the desperate need for any advantage warring against centuries of prejudice and assumptions about human capabilities. Admiral Thuisa broke the silence with a decision that would change everything. Dr. Hawthorne, how quickly can you get me a complete analysis of human military potential and tactical innovations? That depends, the xenoarchaeologist replied, on whether you are willing to listen to voices that have been ignored until now. Marcus knew he had to act. The conversation in the operations center had revealed both the scope of the threat and the potential solution, but time was running out. The Umbral Collective would reach the outer defense perimeter in less than 60 hours, and the galaxy's military leadership was only now beginning to understand that their conventional tactics would be useless. He slipped away from the supply closet and made his way back through the maintenance tunnels, his mind racing with possibilities. In his dormitory room, he gathered his notebooks, his recording device, and the modified weapons schematics he had been developing in secret. Everything he had learned over the past months might finally have a purpose. The evacuation transports were already loading when Marcus reached the main docking bays. His fellow human cadets were queued up with their belongings, most looking relieved to be leaving the academy before the coming battle. Sarah Martinez spotted him approaching and waved him over. "Marcus, there you are. I was starting to think you had gotten lost in the chaos. Come on, they are holding a spot for you on Transport 7. Marcus shook his head. "I am not leaving." Sarah stared at him in disbelief. "What do you mean you are not leaving? The transports are mandatory for all cadets. This is not optional." "Nothing about this situation is optional," Marcus replied quietly. "But I have information that might make a difference. I need to get it to the right people." Before Sarah could argue further, Marcus turned and walked away from the transport bay. He had one chance to make contact with the decision-makers, and it would require him to break every rule he had carefully followed for the past 6 months. The corridor leading to Admiral Thissa's personal office was heavily guarded, but Marcus had prepared for this contingency. Hidden in his notebook was a data chip containing encrypted files he had accessed during his research, including communication logs that proved he had been monitoring classified transmissions. It was enough to get him arrested for espionage, but it might also be enough to get him 5 minutes of the Admiral's attention. The Altarian guards at the office entrance were clearly stressed, their crystalline features flickering with rapid color changes that indicated high anxiety. When Marcus approached and quietly mentioned that he had intelligence about communication security breaches, they immediately escorted him inside. Admiral Thissa was standing before a holographic display showing the approaching Umbral fleet when Marcus entered. Dr. Hawthorne sat at a nearby console, reviewing data streams from across the galaxy. Both women looked up as the guards announced his presence. "Admiral," Marcus began, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "I am Cadet Marcus Chen, and I believe I have information that might be relevant to your current tactical situation." Thissa's crystalline features showed mild irritation. "Cadet, all students are supposed to be on evacuation transports. You should not be here." "Yes, ma'am. But before I leave, I wanted to share some observations I have made during my time at the academy." Marcus pulled out his notebook and opened it to a page filled with detailed diagrams. "I have been studying unconventional warfare tactics and have identified several potential vulnerabilities in current galactic defense protocols." Dr. Hawthorne leaned forward with interest. "What kind of vulnerabilities?" Marcus spread several pages across Thissa's desk, his months of careful research finally seeing daylight. The Galactic Defense Force's tactical doctrine is built around the assumption that all participants will follow established rules of engagement. But human military history includes numerous examples of asymmetric warfare succeeding against superior forces. "Continue," Thissa said, her musical voice taking on a more attentive tone. "Every major species in the galaxy has evolved specialized combat abilities, which has led to predictable tactical preferences. Altarians favor long-range energy combat. Forthans excel at close-quarters battle. Draconians rely on overwhelming firepower and numerical superiority, but humans developed as generalists who succeeded through adaptability and unconventional thinking." Marcus pulled out his recording device and activated a specific file. "Over the past 6 months, I have been documenting conversations and strategic discussions throughout the academy. With respect, Admiral, your tactical planning sessions are not as secure as you believe them to be." The recording played snippets of classified discussions, including detailed defensive plans and fleet coordination protocols. Thissa's features went completely transparent with shock, as she realized how much classified information a quiet cadet had gathered simply by being invisible and listening carefully. "How did you—" she began. "No one notices." "The quiet human student," Marcus replied simply, "which is exactly why human tactics might be effective against an enemy that has studied every other approach to galactic warfare." Dr. Hawthorne stood up from her console, excitement growing in her voice. "Admiral, this is exactly what I was talking about. The Umbral Collective has had 2 centuries to analyze conventional galactic military doctrine, but they have no data on genuine human military innovation." Marcus opened his notebook to a section filled with technical diagrams. "I have been working on modifications to standard military equipment that would improve effectiveness for human physiology. But more importantly, I have been developing tactical scenarios based on historical human conflicts that succeeded against overwhelming odds. Such as, Thysa asked, guerrilla warfare tactics that frustrate conventional forces, decentralized command structures that continue functioning even when primary leadership is eliminated, psychological warfare techniques that exploit enemy assumptions and overconfidence. Marcus pointed to specific diagrams. The Umbral Collective expects to face the same rigid battle formations and predictable responses they have been studying for centuries. They are not prepared for genuine asymmetric warfare. Admiral Thysa studied the notebooks for several minutes, her crystalline features shifting through various colors as she processed the implications. Finally, she looked up at Marcus with an expression he had never seen from any alien instructor. Genuine respect. Cadet Chen, are you volunteering to help develop alternative tactical approaches for the coming battle? Yes, ma'am. But I need access to current intelligence about Umbral capabilities and our available resources, and I need permission to work with other human personnel who understand unconventional warfare principles. Dr. Hawthorne activated her communication console. Admiral, I can have a team of human military historians and tactical specialists here within 12 hours. If Cadet Chen is correct about the potential for asymmetric warfare, we need to move quickly. Thysa nodded decisively. Do it. Cancel Cadet Chen's evacuation orders and grant him temporary security clearance for this operation. She turned back to Marcus. You have 24 hours to develop a tactical assessment that might save this galaxy. Do not waste this opportunity. Marcus felt a mixture of exhilaration and terror as the weight of responsibility settled on his shoulders. For months he had been the invisible student, ignored and overlooked by everyone around him. Now, the survival of galactic civilization might depend on everything he had learned in the shadows. I will need access to complete intelligence files on the Umbral fleet composition and attack patterns, he said, his voice growing more confident with each word. And I need to speak with the evacuation transport commanders. If we are going to implement unconventional tactics, we need every available human in the galaxy who understands how to fight dirty. As alarms continued wailing throughout the academy, and the Umbral fleet drew ever closer to the outer defense perimeter, Marcus Chen began planning a war unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The quiet student was about to become very loud indeed. Within 12 hours, the Galactic Military Academy had been transformed into something unprecedented in its 300-year history. A genuine collaboration between human military thinking and alien technological capabilities. Marcus found himself at the center of a whirlwind of activity as transport ships arrived carrying some of Earth's most experienced military strategists, historians, and special operations veterans. Dr. Sarah Kim, a specialist in asymmetric warfare from the Terran Military Institute, spread holographic battle maps across the main conference table while reviewing Marcus's notebooks. This is extraordinary work, Cadet. You have identified vulnerabilities in galactic defense doctrine that our best analysts missed. Beside her, Colonel James Rodriguez, a grizzled veteran of Earth's last internal conflicts, studied intelligence reports about the Umbral fleet. The enemy formation is textbook conventional warfare. They are expecting to face battle lines, standardized tactics, predictable responses. They have no idea what they are walking into. Admiral Thysa observed the human team with fascination and growing hope. What do you propose, Colonel? Rodriguez activated a tactical display showing the approaching Umbral fleet. We throw out everything they expect and give them something they have never seen before. No battle lines, no fleet formations, no grand tactical doctrine. Instead, we implement what humans call asymmetric swarm tactics. Marcus stepped forward, his confidence growing as his ideas found receptive audiences. The key is to make them fight the wrong war. They have prepared for conventional galactic military doctrine, so we give them something completely different. Dr. Kim highlighted specific points on the tactical display. Human military history is filled with examples of inferior forces defeating superior enemies through unconventional approaches. The American Revolution, where colonists used guerrilla tactics against a professional army. The Winter War, where Finnish forces held off a massive Soviet invasion through mobility and terrain knowledge. Vietnam, Afghanistan, dozens of other conflicts where conventional military wisdom proved useless. But this is space combat, Admiral Thysa pointed out. How do you apply guerrilla tactics in three-dimensional void warfare? Marcus opened his notebook to a section he had labeled Adaptive Ship Combat. By abandoning the concept of ships as platforms for direct engagement and treating them as tools for harassment, misdirection, and psychological warfare, Colonel Rodriguez nodded approvingly. Instead of trying to match their firepower, we make it impossible for them to bring that firepower to bear effectively. We use fast, small vessels to strike at their flanks and supply lines. We employ decoy tactics to make them waste ammunition on false targets. We fragment their fleet by forcing them to respond to threats from multiple directions simultaneously. The Umbral Collective expects disciplined fleet actions, Dr. Kim added. They have studied 2 centuries of galactic naval warfare, which emphasizes formation fighting and concentrated firepower. They are not prepared for chaotic, multi-vector attacks from seemingly random directions. Marcus activated his modified tactical computer, showing simulations he had been running in secret for weeks. I have been analyzing the performance characteristics of standard GDF vessels when operated outside normal parameters. Most ships in the Galactic fleet are over-engineered for safety and conventional deployment. But if we modify their operational protocols, we can achieve performance levels that exceed design specifications. The simulation showed Altarian cruisers conducting high-speed hit-and-run attacks instead of their traditional long-range bombardment role. Vorthan heavy ships were deployed as mobile obstacles rather than main battle units, using their massive bulk to disrupt enemy formations while smaller vessels struck from unexpected angles. Cypherian scouts, normally used for reconnaissance, became swarm fighters that could overwhelm enemy point defenses through sheer numbers and unpredictable movement patterns. Admiral Thissa studied the tactical projections with growing amazement. This is completely contrary to established doctrine. Our ship commanders have trained for decades in conventional fleet operations, which is exactly why it might work, Colonel Rodriguez replied. The enemy has studied those same conventional operations. They know how our admirals think, how our crews are trained, how our equipment is designed to be used. They do not know what happens when we throw out the rulebook. Dr. Kim pulled up historical data from Earth's archives. Human military innovation has always succeeded by identifying the assumptions underlying enemy planning and then systematically violating those assumptions. The Umbral Collective assumes that galactic fleets will engage in formal battle. We do not give them a formal battle. Marcus pointed to specific elements of his tactical plan. We implement what I call persistent harassment doctrine. Instead of trying to destroy their fleet in decisive engagement, we make their advance so costly and unpredictable that they cannot maintain operational coherence. How? Thissa asked. We hit their supply ships, their communication relays, their scout vessels. We force them to defend targets they assumed were secure. We make them fight in 50 different locations, simultaneously, instead of concentrating their forces for maximum effect. Marcus activated another simulation showing the Umbral fleet's advance being disrupted by constant small-scale attacks. Most importantly, we make them doubt their intelligence about galactic military capabilities. Colonel Rodriguez smiled grimly. Psychological warfare. If we can make them believe that the entire galactic fleet has been upgraded with unknown technologies and tactics, they will become cautious. Cautious enemies make mistakes. Dr. Kim highlighted communications intercepts from the advancing Umbral fleet. Their tactical discussions indicate complete confidence in their intelligence assessments. They believe they know exactly what they will face in each engagement. When our forces start behaving in ways that contradict their expectations, it will create doubt and confusion in their command structure. Admiral Thissa was quiet for several minutes, her crystalline features cycling through colors that indicated deep thought. Finally, she looked up at the assembled human advisors. This plan requires our entire fleet to abandon tactical doctrines that have been tested over centuries of warfare. If you are wrong about Umbral weaknesses, we will lose not just this battle but the war. Marcus met her gaze directly. Admiral, if we fight the battle they expect us to fight, we will definitely lose. The intelligence reports make that clear. This approach might fail, but conventional tactics will definitely fail. What do you need to implement these modifications? Thissa asked. Dr. Kim activated her communication console. Access to fleet communication networks so we can transmit new tactical protocols to all ship commanders. Authority to override standard operational procedures. And about 18 hours to retrofit key vessels with the equipment modifications Cadet Chen has developed. You have whatever you need, Thissa decided. But I want to understand something. Cadet Chen, How did you develop these insights while your classmates and instructors saw only a quiet student who was struggling to keep up? Marcus considered the question carefully. I was not struggling to keep up, Admiral. I was learning to think differently. When everyone expects you to fail, you either accept that expectation or you find ways to succeed that no one anticipates. Humans have been doing that for our entire evolutionary history. Colonel Rodriguez laughed. Plus, nobody pays attention to the quiet kid in the back of the classroom. Which means the quiet kid sees and hears everything. As the tactical planning session continued into the night, Marcus realized that his months of careful observation and analysis had led to this moment. The galaxy's survival would depend not on superior firepower or advanced technology, but on the willingness to fight in ways that no one expected. The Umbral Collective had studied galactic military doctrine for 2 centuries, but they had never encountered the human capacity for creative chaos. That was about to change. The first battle began 18 hours ahead of schedule, when Umbral scout ships encountered the modified Galactic Defense Force picket line at the Kepler Nebula. Marcus watched the engagement unfold from the Strategic Operations Center, his tactical modifications about to face their first real test against an enemy that had never known defeat. The Umbral scouts approached in perfect formation, their black hulls moving with mechanical precision through the nebula's swirling gases. Intelligence estimates indicated 12 vessels, each equipped with advanced shields and weapon systems that had effortlessly destroyed conventional GDF patrols. They expected to sweep aside the picket ships and gather intelligence about the main defense fleet's positioning. Instead, they encountered something that made no tactical sense. The GDF vessels did not form defensive lines or attempt to concentrate their firepower. Instead, they scattered in all directions like startled fish, their movements appearing random and chaotic. 3 Altarian light cruisers accelerated beyond their design specifications and disappeared into the nebula's dense gas clouds. A squadron of Zephyrian scouts began broadcasting conflicting sensor data on all frequencies simultaneously. 2 Vorthon heavy destroyers positioned themselves directly in the Umbral formation's path, not to fight, but simply to obstruct their advance. What are they doing? Admiral Thissa asked, her crystalline features flickering with confusion as she watched the tactical display. Marcus smiled grimly. They are fighting dirty. The Umbral scouts hesitated, their perfect formation wavering as they tried to process what they were seeing. Their tactical computers had been programmed to counter every known GDF maneuver, but these actions matched no recorded battle doctrine. The lead Umbral vessel transmitted what appeared to be a query to its fleet command, seeking instructions for dealing with this unprecedented behavior. That moment of hesitation was exactly what Marcus had planned for. The scattered GDF vessels suddenly converged, from multiple directions simultaneously, but not in any formation that appeared in tactical manuals. The Altarian cruisers emerged from the gas clouds at angles that made return fire nearly impossible. The Zephyrian scouts swarmed around individual Umbral ships like angry insects, too small and fast to target effectively but perfectly positioned to disrupt shield harmonics. The Vorthon destroyers activated modified tractor beam arrays that grabbed onto Umbral hulls and spun them off course. Persistent harassment doctrine, Colonel Rodriguez observed with satisfaction. Do not try to destroy the enemy. Just make it impossible for them to do what they came here to do. The Umbral scouts found themselves fighting an engagement that followed no logical pattern. Every time they attempted to form up for concentrated fire, GDF vessels would strike from unexpected directions. When they tried to pursue individual attackers, their targets would lead them into crossfires from hidden positions. Their superior weapons and shields were useless because they could never bring them to bear on stable targets. Most frustrating of all, the GDF ships seemed to be using equipment in ways that violated all known operational parameters. Altarian energy weapons were firing in rapid bursts instead of sustained beams, creating interference patterns that confused Umbral targeting systems. Vorthon ships were using their massive hulls as weapons, ramming Umbral vessels at sublight speeds to damage their maneuvering systems. Zephyrian scouts were transmitting false sensor data that made it appear as if the nebula contained dozens of additional ships. After 20 minutes of chaotic engagement, the Umbral scouts withdrew to a safe distance and began transmitting urgent reports to their main fleet. Marcus could see the confusion in their tactical assessments as they tried to explain encounters that made no sense according to their intelligence about galactic military capabilities. Phase 1. Successful, Dr. Kim announced. The enemy is now aware that our forces are not behaving according to their expectations. Admiral Thesa studied the after-action reports with amazement. We achieved tactical victory against superior forces without losing a single vessel. How is that possible? Because we made them fight the wrong battle, Marcus explained. They came prepared to engage conventional fleet units in standardized tactical scenarios. Instead, we gave them chaos, unpredictability, and equipment being used in ways their computers had never seen before. The Umbral main fleet's response was swift and telling. Long-range sensors detected massive course corrections as the enemy forces reorganized their approach vectors. Instead of the confident, direct advance they had maintained for days, the Umbral fleet began deploying in defensive formations and sending out additional scout groups to probe for unknown threats. Colonel Rodriguez laughed as he reviewed the intelligence reports. Look at that. They have gone from offensive operation to defensive posture in a single engagement. They are now afraid of what they might encounter. More importantly, Dr. Kim added, they are diverting resources to investigate threats that may not exist. Every ship they send on reconnaissance missions is a ship that cannot participate in their main assault. Marcus activated his tactical computer to show the next phase of operations. Now we implement expanded harassment protocols across multiple sectors. Make them believe that their intelligence about galactic fleet capabilities was completely wrong. Over the next 12 hours, the modified GDF forces conducted 17 separate engagements across 4 star systems. Each battle followed the same pattern. Apparent chaos and confusion that resolved into tactical victories through unconventional approaches. Umbral vessels found themselves consistently outmaneuvered by enemies that refused to fight according to any recognizable doctrine. The psychological impact was even more significant than the tactical results. Intercepted Umbral communications revealed growing uncertainty among their commanders about the nature of the opposition they faced. Reports described impossible maneuvers, unknown weapon modifications, and completely unpredictable tactical responses. Some Umbral officers began speculating that the Galactic fleet had been upgraded with captured Umbral technology or had formed secret alliances with unknown species. They are starting to doubt their own intelligence, Admiral Thesa observed as she reviewed the communication intercepts. 2 centuries of preparation, and they no longer trust their tactical assessments. Marcus pointed to specific patterns in the Umbral fleet movements. Notice how they have stopped advancing in concentrated formations. They are now spreading their forces across wider areas, trying to cover multiple possible threat vectors simultaneously. That is exactly what we need for the final phase. Which is? Thesa asked. Dr. Kim activated a strategic display showing the entire outer defense perimeter. Phase 3. We make them defeat themselves. When an enemy loses confidence in their intelligence and tactical doctrine, they become susceptible to strategic deception on a massive scale. Colonel Rodriguez smiled as he explained the final element of their plan. We are going to convince the Umbral Collective that they are not facing the Galactic Defense Force at all. We are going to make them believe they have encountered something much worse. A completely unknown enemy that has been hiding in the shadows for centuries, just waiting for someone to threaten galactic civilization. Marcus opened his notebook to the final section of tactical plans. The Umbral Collective split from galactic society because they believed they were superior to all other species. Their greatest fear is not defeat. It is the discovery that they were wrong about their own superiority. As the Umbral fleet continued its advance toward the core systems, now moving with cautious uncertainty instead of confident aggression, Marcus realized that the quiet student's greatest lesson was about to be taught on a galactic scale. Sometimes the most effective weapon against overwhelming force was not greater force, but the simple willingness to refuse to fight the battle your enemy expected. The final battle began with something the Umbral Collective had never encountered in 2 centuries of planning: complete tactical confusion. Their massive fleet, spread across 12 star systems to counter the perceived multi-vector threat, suddenly found itself facing an enemy that appeared to be everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. Marcus stood in the Strategic Operations Center, watching as his months of careful analysis culminated in the largest military deception in galactic history. Across dozens of tactical displays, the modified GDF forces implemented what he had privately called the Ghost Fleet Protocol, creating the illusion of a vast, technologically superior force that existed primarily in the enemy's imagination. The deception began with modified sensor arrays broadcasting false signatures throughout the outer defense perimeter. Umbral scouts detected what appeared to be thousands of ships moving through hyperspace, their energy signatures unlike anything in known galactic databases. The false contacts appeared and disappeared unpredictably, suggesting stealth technology far beyond current capabilities. Phase 1 of Ghost Fleet Protocol is active, Dr. Kim reported. Enemy forces are reporting contact with unidentified vessels in 17 different sectors simultaneously. Admiral Thesa watched the Umbral fleet's response with fascination. Instead of advancing toward their original targets, enemy formations were maneuvering to investigate the mysterious sensor contacts. Their carefully planned assault was dissolving into a scattered hunting expedition for enemies that did not exist. They are taking the bait, Colonel Rodriguez observed with satisfaction. Look at their formation changes. They have completely abandoned their original tactical plan. Marcus activated additional deception protocols. Across the defense perimeter, small teams of modified GDF vessels began implementing coordinated harassment attacks designed to reinforce the illusion of superior technology. Altarian ships used modified energy weapons to create exotic radiation signatures that suggested unknown power sources. Vorthan vessels deployed specialized mines that detonated with unusual energy patterns, implying advanced explosive technology. Zephyrian scouts transmitted carefully crafted communication fragments that appeared to be orders from a vast hidden fleet. The psychological impact on Umbral forces was immediate and devastating. Intercepted communications revealed panic spreading through their command structure as officers reported encounters that contradicted everything they believed. About galactic military capabilities. Unknown. Vessels are using weapons technology at least 50 years ahead of our intelligence estimates, transmitted one Umbral commander, requesting immediate tactical analysis from fleet intelligence. Negative contact on direct sensor sweeps, but energy signatures indicate massive fleet presence throughout the sector, reported another. These cannot be standard GDF vessels. Marcus smiled as he listened to the growing confusion in enemy communications. They are starting to construct their own explanation for what they are experiencing, and that explanation is exactly what we want them to believe. The Umbral fleet commanders, faced with evidence that their intelligence was completely wrong, began developing theories about what they were actually fighting. Some believed they had encountered a secret galactic black operations fleet. Others speculated that an unknown alien species had allied with the galaxy against the Umbral threat. A few even suggested that the Umbral Collective's own departure from galactic society had triggered the development of advanced defensive technologies specifically designed to counter their return. Perfect, Dr. Kim observed as she reviewed the intelligence intercepts. They are so focused on explaining the impossible that they have stopped questioning whether it actually exists. The final phase of the deception began when Admiral Thesa authorized the deployment of what Marcus had called the Revelation Protocol. Instead of maintaining the illusion indefinitely, they would reveal just enough truth to completely shatter Umbral confidence while demonstrating the actual source of their tactical revolution. Marcus activated a galaxy-wide communication array and began broadcasting on frequencies he knew the Umbral fleet was monitoring. Instead of military communications, he transmitted something far more devastating: educational content. The broadcasts began with recordings from his own notebooks, showing the tactical analysis he had developed over months of careful observation. His quiet voice explained the fundamental weaknesses in galactic military doctrine, the predictable patterns that made conventional fleets vulnerable to asymmetric warfare, and the historical precedents for inferior forces defeating superior enemies through unconventional tactics. This is Cadet Marcus Chen of the Terran Defense Corps, his recorded voice announced across the communication channels. For the past 6 months, I have been analyzing galactic military doctrine and identifying strategic vulnerabilities that could be exploited by any force with sufficient tactical flexibility. The broadcasts continued with detailed explanations of every technique the modified GDF forces had used against the Umbral fleet. The sensor deceptions, the modified equipment operations, the psychological warfare tactics, everything was laid out in clear, academic language as if Marcus were delivering a lecture on military innovation. The unconventional responses you have encountered represent the application of human asymmetric warfare doctrine to galactic naval combat. No advanced technology was required, no secret alliances were necessary, and no hidden fleets were deployed. All tactical successes were achieved through the simple expedient of refusing to fight according to your expectations. The impact on Umbral morale was catastrophic. Their massive, technologically superior fleet had been outmaneuvered and psychologically defeated by a force using equipment they had studied for centuries, operated by crews they had dismissed as inferior, implementing tactics developed by a single human cadet who had been ignored by his own instructors. Admiral Thissa watched as Umbral fleet formations began to collapse. Ships that had maintained perfect discipline for their entire approach suddenly broke formation and began retreating toward the galactic rim, their communications channels filled with angry arguments between commanders who could not accept that their centuries of preparation had been rendered useless by creative thinking and tactical flexibility. "The enemy fleet is withdrawing," reported the Altarian tactical officer, her crystalline voice filled with disbelief. "All formations are breaking off and returning to the rim territories." Colonel Rodriguez shook his head in amazement. "They are not just retreating. They are running. Their entire worldview has been shattered." Marcus deactivated the communication array and turned to Admiral Thissa. The Umbral Collective based their entire strategy on the assumption that they understood galactic military capabilities better than anyone else. When that assumption was proven false, their confidence collapsed. Dr. Kim pulled up the final intelligence reports. Intercepted communications indicate significant internal conflict within their command structure. Multiple faction leaders are questioning the strategic assumptions that led to this expedition. It will likely take them decades to reorganize for another attempt. Admiral Thissa stood silent for several minutes, her crystalline features cycling through colors that indicated deep thought. Finally, she turned to Marcus with an expression of profound respect. "Cadet Chen, you have achieved something that our finest strategists believed impossible. You have defeated a superior enemy force without a single major fleet engagement. How do you feel about your accomplishment?" Marcus considered the question carefully. 6 months ago, he had been the invisible student, ignored and overlooked by everyone around him. Now his tactical innovations had saved galactic civilization from conquest. But more importantly, he had proven that being underestimated could be the greatest strategic advantage of all. "Feel like maybe it is time for galactic military doctrine to start listening to voices that have been ignored until now," he replied quietly. "The galaxy is full of species with unique perspectives on warfare and conflict resolution. If we learn to incorporate all of those viewpoints instead of relying on traditional approaches, we might never face a threat like this again." As celebration broke out throughout the Strategic Operations Center, Marcus returned to his notebooks. There was still so much to learn, so many tactical possibilities to explore, and so many assumptions to challenge. The quiet student had become the galaxy's newest military theorist, but in his heart, he remained what he had always been, someone who succeeded by watching carefully, thinking differently, and refusing to accept that anyone else's limitations applied to him. The Umbral Collective would return eventually, but when they did, they would face a galaxy that had learned the most important lesson of all. That true strength came not from superior technology or overwhelming force, but from the willingness to think beyond the boundaries of conventional wisdom. And somewhere in the military academies across dozens of worlds, other quiet students would be taking careful notes, developing their own unconventional ideas, and preparing to defend their galaxy in ways that no enemy could predict or prepare for.